I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close-Up. The Regional Plan Association has offered an ambitious and audacious plan for the metropolitan area. Christopher Jones, Senior Vice President and one of the plan's architects, joins us in a moment to explain. My Times colleague Richard Sandomir's latest book, The Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, Gary Cooper, and the Making of a Classic, is a classic in its own right. We'll revisit with This Land's Dan Barry and the Lost Children of Tuam, along with Kassie Bracken's video for nytimes.com. And the backstory on hiatus this week, but I'll offer some final words as we enter the holiday week with CODA. First, Christopher Jones, Senior Vice President and Chief Planner of the Regional Plan Association. The fourth regional plan has now just come out this month. The biggest controversy, of course, was whether or not to shut the subway system down at night so there could be repairs. Any second thoughts about that?
Not really. I mean, this is one of the kind of audacious ideas that we have in the plan. And we really want this plan to make people think about the status quo. If we really want to get out from under the the failing transportation systems that we have, if we really want to build affordable housing for everyone who needs it, we have to start doing things differently. We have to start questioning some of the some of the assumptions that we've had on many policies that we've had over the years. So this was something that we proposed, and obviously it would need to be evaluated, but the idea is that if we are really going to modernize our subway system in a time that really works for people in our lifetime, we have to do things at a faster pace than what we've done already. And if you look at late night service on the subways, it's every 20 minutes scheduled. Maybe it comes once an hour. There's often service closures. So what we proposed just on weekday nights is to run high-speed bus services along these routes. Use those windows to do maintenance that is otherwise done during evening hours or weekends when you have a lot more people riding the system.
You would also create a transit reconstruction authority. Where would the money come from to rebuild the system? And as you say, you want to create the Trans-Regional Express and a tri-borough line and really spread it out even more.
Yeah. Well, the place that you start is that we are underspending on infrastructure in this region and have been for some time. You probably should be spending about twice as much as what you are on the subway and commuter rails as we are now with the value of those assets. So, but what we proposed is certainly going to cost money. It's going to be expensive in many cases, and there are a few places where we think the money can come from. The first is just by doing things less expensively than we're doing it already. And that means looking at everything from the way projects are approved in Albany, where you often set unrealistic deadlines that causes change orders down the line, to the procurement processes at the MTA, to the work rules that are in place for many of these. So part of it is looking at how can we do these projects less expensively than we are already. But there are other types of revenue that we think make sense, not just because it will give you a fair amount of money to invest in the system, but also it will help make the region more equitable, more efficient than it is now, starting with congestion pricing. I mean, that was an idea that we had back in our...
You need to come up with a new name for it, though.
Yes. Well, there's the Move New York plan, which
Okay.
which we support, which would provide a large source of revenue for the system to start with. Another thing that we think should happen is go to a regional system of carbon pricing. California already has such a system. They have a cap and trade system which both reduces greenhouse gas emissions and raises revenue for everything from transit to housing. We think that's something that should be put in place in this region as well.
One of the things we've talked about on this program before is what seems to be a lack of will to address problems like these. This is, as we said, the fourth regional plan, the 1922. The first was, to a large extent, accomplished. It took a while, though. But how do you create a critical mass of people who will get up and say, or even the governor and the mayor at the same table, this is something we need and we're going to find a way to pay for it?
You know, it's interesting. Every plan that has come out, people have said it will never happen. When we came out with our third plan back in 1996, we proposed things like the Second Avenue subway that people have been laughing at for decades. We proposed linking the Long Island Railroad into Grand Central Terminal. We proposed a new mixed-use office district on the far west side. So it takes persistence and it takes timing. Sometimes the stars just have to align for these things, but if there's a plan in place and there is enough of a will, I think with what's going on right now with the with the subway system and just the amount of pain that people are feeling with it, I think just kind of the looming crisis of what could happen with transportation over the Hudson River if we don't fix the tubes there now, hopefully will create enough of a sense of urgency that people can start acting on some of these now.
When you look at the vagaries of climate change, when you look at the possibilities of driverless cars, can we really plan 20 or 25 years into the future?
We can plan to be flexible enough to address these as it comes along. Let's take climate change, for example. We know that the seas are rising. We don't know how fast, we don't know when the next storm is going to hit, but we know which places would be under, 3 feet of sea level, when it eventually does happen. We've mapped it, we've put out a report on it. So what you have to start doing now is to start planning for it. You have time, but you have to start now. So what we proposed is, and part of the problem is that right now the planning is done, mostly city by city, town by town, village by village. Some of these are so small that they really don't have the capacity to do it. So we've proposed a regional coastal commission that would provide resources. We have some ideas for funding that would support it, and it would help coordinate plans among these different entities.
Well, thank you for joining us. Christopher Jones of the Regional Plan Association. For more information, you can go to the organization's website, rpa.org. And when we return, my Times colleague, Richard Sandomir, on the pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, Gary Cooper, and the making of a classic. Welcome back to the New York Times Close-Up. Joining us now, my Times colleague, obituary writer par excellence, Richard Sandomir, a longtime sports and sports business writer for the paper. His latest book marries both worlds, The Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, Gary Cooper, and the Making of a Classic. It's just been published by Hachette Books. It's been 75 years since the movie was released. It continues to resonate for all of us wanting heroes, Yankee fans or not, especially now. And Bob Lipsyte, our journalistic colleague, says when it comes to the confluence of sports, business, and culture, nobody hits and fields like Richard Sandomir. Richard, how did you get interested in doing this book?
Well, I'd always loved the movie Pride of the Yankees, and then I became more and more fascinated by Gary Cooper's delivery of the Luckiest Man speech, where Gehrig, dying of ALS, standing there at July 4th, 1939, saying he's the luckiest man on the face of the earth. And it's a curious thing to say when you're clearly not lucky. There's nothing fortunate about a disease you're going to die from, and he only died 2 years after diagnosis. So Cooper delivered it in a way that makes it resonate further, because the original speech, there's very little of it left from the newsreels. So the only full version of the speech is Cooper's. And then I was reading a biography of Samuel Goldwyn, who produced the movie. And in it, it's clear that he's not a baseball fan. He knows nothing about sports. If you want baseball, go to a game, he said. But his story editor, Niven Bush, was a big baseball fan, and he showed Goldwyn the newsreels. And it's this little back and forth between them, between the non-baseball fan from Poland and the baseball fan, from this New Yorker writer, Niven Bush, who became a story editor and a screenwriter. And he shows it to Goldwyn, and Goldwyn understood emotion. And the newsreel finishes, and he's crying. He says, "Run it again." Run it again. Lights come up. Go get Mulvey, Jim Mulvey, his number 2 guy. Let's make a deal with Eleanor Gehrig. It's the confluence of all those factors, the speech, the performance, and the story that led me to the Samuel Goldwyn Archives, where that's where my book was there.
And Eleanor Gehrig played a role in making the movie, right?
Well, they had to sign her up to do it. I guess they could have done it without her, but why do that? She gave many hours of interviews to Paul Gallico, the first screenwriter, and Gallico is best known years later for writing The Poseidon Adventure. Mm-hmm. He wrote the first draft of the screenplay and the outline, and she would keep peppering Goldwyn with letters saying, I've read this script, you got this wrong, you got this wrong. You can't have Miller Huggins in a suit in a Yankee office signing Lou Gehrig to a contract. She lost that one. She lost a lot of the battles, but she was vetting it. She understood baseball. She was a White Sox fan when she met Gehrig in Chicago, and she wanted to make sure that sports writers wouldn't look at this film and say, "Hey, you're making a mockery of baseball. You're making a mockery of my husband's life."
She also didn't want Babe Ruth to overshadow Lou Gehrig.
She didn't want Babe Ruth in the movie at all. If given her druthers, she felt that Babe would overshadow Gary Cooper, as Ruth overshadowed Gehrig in real life. Gehrig was a shy, retiring guy. Ruth was the opposite, very much the opposite, a sybarite. You couldn't stop his appetites. It's amazing he had time to play baseball. So she was very reticent. And also Gehrig and Ruth weren't getting along. They hadn't spoken for years by this time. And she didn't want Ruth alone in a scene. She said, okay, if we're going to have him, he can't be alone. So she was very reluctant to see him in there.
Richard, speaking of playing baseball, could Gary Cooper play baseball?
He had never learned. Between ages 8 and 11 or 12, his parents, who had a British background, sent him to England to be schooled as a
Could he play cricket?
Gentleman. There's no record of that. He was a horseman, and he could box. He used to box with Hemingway, his good friend, when they were in Idaho together. So Gehrig, Cooper was, he was very concerned that, he'd be found out as a phony. And so he took six weeks of training with Lefty O'Doul, a minor league manager at the time who managed all the DiMaggio boys in San Francisco. And he was a former National League batting champion. He had a great short career. And over 6 weeks, they had to turn Cooper, who was a righty, into a reasonable facsimile of a lefty. And they kind of did. But also, the director Sam Wood and the editors were very, very careful not to let any of the seams of Cooper's inability to truly be like Gehrig show. So you rarely saw the ball connect with the bat. Mm-hmm.
So did he have a double in the movie? Or?
Well, he had a double for certain things. For certain faraway shots, Babe Herman, the former Brooklyn Dodger first baseman, was there. And if you really look closely at the sequence in the minor leagues, it's a montage of shots where Cooper is supposed to look like he's throwing and batting left-handed. It's Babe Herman. There's a little bit of there's a story that's gone around for years that Cooper was so unable to make the switch to lefty that they flipped the film. If that is at all true, the only thing in the final cut that shows that is a sequence where he's throwing in the minor leagues, and it's very clear that they have flipped it because a Band-Aid on one hand appears in the next scene, in the hand on the next scene.
Now, if we had 6 weeks of training, could we bat as well as Lou Gehrig?
I think the task is to bat as well as Gary Cooper did. But no, we couldn't be like Gehrig because Gehrig was a phenomenal hitter. One of the things that I sense is that Cooper did not have to unlearn any bad habits. Mm-hmm. So if you say, "Well, I'm a righty, I can't do that," the hardest thing to do probably is to go from throwing righty to throwing lefty. Mm-hmm. That's very, very hard. But when he's O'Doul said to him, "Hitting left-handed, I'm going to have you look like you're chopping wood." So he put an axe in his hand, and Cooper knew how to do that. So that was sort of like the pathway.
So there's hope for all of us. Richard Sandomir, Pride of the Yankees, Lou Gehrig, and Gary Cooper, a book that is a must for baseball and movie buffs, The Making of a Classic, just been published by Hachette. And when I return, my Times colleague, This Land columnist, Dan Barry. Welcome back. Joining me now, one of our very gifted writers, Dan Barry. Last week he displayed his heart and talent in The Lost Children of Tuam, which became a section unto itself in the New York Times. The children were lost until one housewife made it her mission to uncover the cruel truths that literally lay beneath her feet. New York Times video journalist Kassie Bracken accompanied the story with a stunning video. We'll see an excerpt. You can see the whole thing on nytimes.com. Dan, how did you and Kassie come across this story?
Well, my mother was born about 40 miles from where this took place in County Galway, Ireland. So I kind of knew the story. It broke back in 2014 in one way. And then in March of this year, the suspicions of this housewife, Catherine Corliss, were confirmed by some analysis, excavation and analysis, that indeed there were the remains of children ages fetal to 3 years in the grounds of this property.
And why were they there in this home for sort of abandoned children?
Right, it's a home called the Mother and Baby Home, and they were established in the early 1920s in Ireland to take in and rehabilitate unwed mothers and to raise their children up to a certain age, usually to first communion, about 7 years old, after which those children, they would not stay with their birth mothers, but rather they would either be fostered out, adopted, or sent to an industrial school, which is sort of like a Dickensian Oliver Twist
Workhouse
program, right?
And what happened to them?
Well, it was this particular home was financed by the county and state governments in Ireland, but it was managed by a religious order of nuns, the Bon Secours. And so over the course of time, many of these children died, hundreds. Now they died, perhaps there was issues of prenatal care, but also possibly care after birth, improper care, inappropriate or neglectful care. And so these children were dying of gastroenteritis and marasmus, which is malnutrition, and other diseases that sometimes would go through a ward and infect these children, and they would die by the dozens a year sometimes.
And presumably with proper care, they could have been saved?
Presumably, yeah. And certainly the Irish government will admit that the regulatory aspect of this, that being the Irish government checking on what was going on in these homes, because it was one of many around Ireland, was inadequate.
Let's take a look at that video from Kassie Bracken at nytimes.com.
I remember the children at school just vaguely, and I do remember they were segregated from the rest of us. We weren't allowed to play with them. These were like a different species at the time.
My mother got pregnant outside of marriage, and of course that was a big sin. And the priest in the parish got to hear about it and told her parents that it was an awful disgrace, that she couldn't be seen out because she'd be a bad influence. So they told her then that when the baby is due, that she was to be taken to Tuam, the home in Tuam, and the nuns will look after her there. Then he opened the door and told her she'll have to leave. And she said, I want my son. And they just closed the door on her face. And every week then she would walk in the centre of Tuam, out the Dublin Road, every week for 5.5 years, knocking on the door. I want to take my son out there. That's my son you have in there. I want to rear him. I want to look after him. And they said, no, he's got to be fostered out. And that was it.
I have no memories of it. I was there for 4.5 years.
There was a hedge each side of us and a crowd of us walking. That's the only memory I have.
I thought I was an animal at one stage. I used to get dreams at night that I was growing horns. And when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do, such a sigh of relief.
There was no love, there was no care. What happened in the home? You know, it can happen to you, that you can block things out at such a young age.
I suppose at the back of my mind, it was there in the subconscious, wondering about the children. I thought it would be just a simple history, the history of the Bonscore sisters and how they worked and how they operated. I thought I'd go to the local library and thought I'd get a volume of information in the home to work on. There was absolutely nothing. So I went to the local people. I said, that's the best way to find out information. And locals were a bit hesitant to say, oh, the poor little children in there, so, you know, they were treated badly. An odd person to tell you they remember screaming in the home. It was still very much a hush-hush affair. But I was gathering all this information in the back of my mind and getting a picture. And it was only then I got the story of, back in the 1970s, that the two boys found bones of children in a tank.
I've often thought about it afterwards, like, you know, what did we come across? Like, it was a chamber, a H chamber, you know, and the amount of bones that were in it, there was a good few. Like what we came across in 1972 was reported, and the government knew about it, but yet they didn't do anything about it.
This whole story wouldn't get out of my head, so I had to follow it. I had to determine who was buried there. First of all, of course, I asked the Bonscore sisters, and they said they had no knowledge or no records whatsoever of any burial in the home. And got on to the county council who owned the land then, and they had no records of burials either. So I wondered then, my thoughts went then to how many children actually died in the home. That's an inspector's report for the Tuam home from 1947. It shows the condition of the babies and toddlers, and it makes very harrowing reading. You have a 13-month-old baby in the care of Bonscore sisters who are a nursing congregation. You have a miserable, emaciated child with voracious appetite and no control over body functions, probably mentally defective. Wizened limbs, 3 months old, wizened limbs. 3 weeks old, emaciated and delicate. And that was the Excel copy of the deaths of the babies and children.
Dan Barry, you wrote that you thought you were a natural for this story. Why, and did you turn out to be?
I don't know, that might still be an open question, but because my mother grew up in rural Ireland, in Galway in particular, I kind of knew some of the nuances of the culture. It was part of my own culture. And I was at ease in the homes of that woman, for example, Catherine Corliss, and at ease with talking to some of the adult home babies, they're called. So I guess I was a natural in understanding the language, even though it's English, understanding the language.
And why weren't the babies just buried normally?
We don't know. And so what happened was this home closed in 1961, and then many years later, this woman wanted to look into the history of that home. And so she found the death certificates for close to 800 children, but she couldn't find the burial records for these children. And that's what led her eventually to discover that at least some, if not all, are buried in the grounds of the home. The home has been since demolished, and now there's housing on it. So it's a big issue in Ireland. What do you do with this property? You know, it's not a consecrated ground. And also, many of these children were baptized. So if you're baptized in the Catholic faith, you're entitled to burial in consecrated ground. And one would argue this was not consecrated.
Fascinating story. You can read it at nytimes.com. Also see Kassie Bracken's video. My thanks to This Land columnist Dan Barry, the New York Times, for joining me. Please read The Lost Children of Tuam if you haven't done so already. You can find it online at nytimes.com, along with Kassie Bracken's documentary. I'll be back for some final thoughts with Coda. In 1897, 8-year-old Virginia O'Hanlon of West 95th Street in Manhattan, or perhaps her father, wrote a letter to the editor of the New York Sun. "Some of my little friends say there is no Santa Claus," she wrote. "Papa says if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus?" The reply by Francis Pharcellus Church became the most reprinted newspaper editorial ever, and deserves a rehearing in these cynical times. He wrote, "Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant in his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not, but that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are unseen and unseeable in the world. You may tear apart the baby's rattle and see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest man, nor even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernal beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world there is nothing else real and abiding. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times, 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts. Have a wonderful holiday.